national trial attorney Michael Jaafar is with us. Michael, let's start with you. You're new to the program this hour. Your thoughts on this jury statement where they are saying we have been unable to reach a decision that's unanimous. Doesn't mean that they're hopelessly deadlocked. They didn't say those words, but they're struggling.
At the beginning of when the jury first took this case, I said if they come back with a quick jury, that means that they would have bought into the whole conspiracy hoax. If they don't come back with a quick decision, that means they did not believe the hoax and they were tied up on the murder 2 charge, whether or not intent was proven beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So I'm hopeful that I'm happy and confident that the jury did not believe into this conspiracy hoax, which I thought was just complete hoodwink. But this does not shock me. I thought that they would take time if they did not believe in the hoax, and they would have either come back with a verdict in guilty for charges 2 and 3. I was doubtful about charge number 1, the murder 2. But this does not shock me, and I'm happy that this jury took the time. You could probably imagine in that room, it was contentious. It's contentious even at a bar anywhere in Massachusetts, people not related to the case. Imagine this jury, what it would have been like. The tension would have been palpable. This is the type of things that crime legends, dramas are built on. I'm very interested with this.
They are going to go back to deliberations and then take that lunch break, and they're doing something a little different today. They're not going to deliberate over lunch. Michael Jaafar, I want to ask you about how Beverly Cannoni, her honor there inside of the courtroom, what she said to these jurors. She said, we basically believe that you've had not enough time. It was a very short day, so we want you to continue. We're going to order you this lunch, and we want you to clear your heads and then keep deliberating. It doesn't go to the point of, I don't think, an Allen charge or a dynamite charge where sometimes judges say you're the best jury to handle this case. I'm sure that through diligence you can come to a decision. It may come to that, but what do you think of the very short instruction that she gave, not only in this situation, but the last question where they wanted something and she basically said, you have what you have?
That was a very polite version of her saying, give me a break, folks. The prosecution put on an 8-week trial. We've been at this for a year and a half. This case is rendered national media since last February, right? You had 8 weeks of evidence. You had testimony. You had everything. You had just literally more even so than maybe even possibly the O.J. Simpson case. Maybe not, but close, right? And you're going to come back in 3-4 days and say that you can't reach a decision. Give me a break. We've all been busting our backs. I need you to get back in there. Get over yourselves. I don't know if it's one of you. I don't know if it's 2 of you. She was really, Julia, she was speaking to the minority. She's assuming there's a minority. We don't know. I don't think this is like a 6-6 type of thing. I'm guessing, but this is usually like a 1 or 2 member jury that's saying, I don't believe this, right? And then 10 or 11 saying, I believe that. They've reached a consensus. So she was merely speaking to the minority and helping the majority so that when they go back in there, the majority can look at the minority and say, see, the judge isn't even going to let us go. We got to make a decision. You want to be here another 2 weeks? You got to just agree with us. That's kind of how these things go. So that was a polite way of her doing that. She wanted to throw her weight, and she clearly needed to do it. She needed to throw her weight into this. As my co-panelist said, this is very divisive. This is a very divisive issue. And Matt Johnson said that he'd run into people in hotels and restaurants who are not related to the case and say, my boss told me I can't talk about this case. Well, imagine what this jury is going through, right? So this judge knows this. She wanted to kind of cut through that tension and kind of push, and she didn't care, convict or not. She just wanted to tell them, we're not going to do this because clearly we're going to have to do another trial. Clearly we have to go through the consequences of you not coming up with a decision is we have to retry this entire case. This has to be in national media. I probably have to release Karen Reed. She's going to become a superstar, and she might have murdered somebody. She might have murdered a police officer, and she's going to make millions of dollars in the meantime. You're going to have so much more chaos because you guys can't get over yourselves and make it. You have all the evidence a future jury will have. So get over yourselves. I'll buy you lunch for $20. Get yourself back in that room and do your work. This is the work we brought you in to do. get it done.
Michael, we're going to a break real quick, but you think that the state would try this again?
I think they'd have to try it again. Look, it's pretty clear to me the forensic evidence is overwhelmingly in favor that she ran him over intentionally or otherwise, right? There's a bunch of innuendo by the defense. They did not deliver on the promise they made before the trial started, which is Brian Alpert and gang killed John O'Keefe, threw him out, covered it up. I think they have to try this again. A police officer was killed by somebody, and the forensic evidence points in favor against Karen Reed. I'm not saying she intentionally killed John O'Keefe. That has not been proven, but they have to try this again. They already are so embarrassed. They have to fire Michael Proctor next week. He won't be on the force when they try it again. It's gonna be tough.
And they may offer a deal, but we'll talk about that on the other side of this quick break.
And Michael Jaafar. Michael, let's start with you. All right, so we were watching some mashups of Karen's comments to our very own Matt Johnson, asking her about if she's going to testify. Obviously, she made it seem to reporters like Matt that she was open to the idea, but then she would go off the advice of her attorney. Do you think she should have testified?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is no way they could have brought her within 10 feet of that witness stand. She would have only sullied up the case. Look, her attorneys did a phenomenal job creating doubt on the top charge. And so she could have only harmed herself because a lot of baggage could have came up. She might have opened the door to her prior conduct, to her prior acts. Only bad things could have happened. That attorney wanted to end on a good note. He knew his client. I mean, we don't know his client as well as he knows his client. From the snippets that we saw, a little bit of a narcissist, light is the best disinfectant. Give me a break, right? Like, he knew what he was dealing with, but he did a fantastic job. At the end of that, when you work, like in his case, he worked for close to 2 years to build up to that closing argument, right? 2 years. This was his life, right? I'm sure he had other cases, but this was his life. So to do all that and sully it up and put it all in the hands of a person like Karen Reed would have been a disaster. One thing I remember when I was young, my mentor told me, as an attorney, you always hold your breath every single time your client opens their mouth. Tell your client to keep their mouth closed, because anytime they open their mouth, you hold your breath as to what's going to come out.
Yeah.
So I don't think she should have ever testified.
And she didn't, which is no doubt advice of counsel.
All right, let's bring in our guest to discuss. Joining us now is National Trial Attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, all right, I think for the defense, these engineers were their best witnesses, their best evidence, talking about that this, obviously, they were trying to blow the state's theory out of the water here.
Yeah, this was the best part for the defense. This was the part where they created some reasonable doubt. I don't think that it overcame it for me. I don't think it overcame the doubt for me, because even the defense expert did say conceivably you could have thousands of force falling back. I've had clients who've died by falling back on stairs and hitting their head. So I know it's possible, and I've seen it possible. I've seen experts talk about this, and that expert said that exact thing. So for me, the case fit well in charges 2 and 3, even with those experts. But that was the best part. To your point, Kelly, that was the best, in my opinion, the only part of the defense that was not innuendo, assumption, conspiracy. That was the guts and meat and potatoes of a solid defense there. So I do agree with you on that.
All right, Michael Jaafar, stand by, because I do want to ask you more about what this jury may be thinking inside that deliberation room. But we're getting word that we're getting a live feed from outside of the courthouse. Some of the people who have gathered there, we've seen a lot of colorful moments from Matt Johnson giving us a close look there outside. But let's take a listen in to what's happening outside the Norfolk County Courthouse. Tension's really flaring there outside of the courthouse. And what we're seeing, Michael Jaafar, we've, of course, seen plenty of pro-Karen Reed supporters and interviews with them, but it seems now there's this swell of those who are counter-protesters. I mean, it really seems like there's almost a movement out there that has this political feel to it, but it makes you a bit nervous when you have the mashup of these two sides who feel so strongly about this case.
Now you see why the judge wanted the jury to take more time and come to a decision. You can see exactly why, because she lives in that community. When she gets in her car at the end of the day to go home, she's got to drive past these people. When she got to come into court, she got to drive past these people. There's security that, like, this is a courthouse where the public walk in and they pay traffic ticket fines, right? Like, this is not a courthouse that's accustomed to having security. It's not built for that, right? So you can see why the judge wanted to do this. And so look, this was all ratcheted up by Karen Reed's defense attorneys, and I said this at the time. Back in January, when there was a pretrial hearing because the state was objecting to turning over evidence, I think it was like letters in between the investigators and the DNA samples to allow the defense attorneys to independently examine them. The state objected, which I thought was a massive mistake. I was on Court TV saying that was a massive mistake, because then the defense attorneys came in and showed pictures of his arm and said, we think there's a cover-up. We think that the Massachusetts police are covering up for one of their own. And that's when this mob was created. It was created then, and it has not left the courthouse since then. That was the most, if you're ever, you know, in a course to become an investigator, to work for a policing agency, learn from this mistake. If the defense wants you to turn over evidence, do it, because they gave air to this little mob that's there, right? The mob did not exist before January 4th. It existed after that motion. Everybody was just, oh my God, there's a conspiracy going on in Massachusetts, and we always knew that it was corrupt, and they're covering up for one of their own. They killed the police officer. This poor woman, this poor helpless woman, is being painted as a murderer, and she's not. And that's when this mob was created. And so now you can see why this judge wants this case to be over. I'm not in her mind. I don't know what her opinion is of the case. I assume she just wants this thing to end. She doesn't want to come back for another trial. So it's pretty sad, but yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, we were just watching some live pictures. Matt Johnson was out there interviewing some more people. We didn't go in and take them. We're not sure exactly what they were saying, so we'll have to screen that, and then we can bring that to our viewers. But when we watch a lot of these comments, I mean, people are so fired up over this case. And again, I will say this, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened that night. We just know kind of what we've seen from the evidence. But people say everyone wants justice for John O'Keefe and his family. Not sure what exactly transpired that night. Again, that's what prosecutors do. We fight for justice. We want to be a voice for the victims. But also in our society, Michael, the last thing we want is to convict someone who is innocent. And we have seen that time and time again, you know, throughout this country for decades. I'm not saying that she is innocent. I'm just saying that's why we have a trial. And to see people so fired up, so divided on this, I mean, my thought really is, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. The jurors are the ones that are the most familiar with the evidence, and they're the ones that are going to make the decision.
I fully agree, which is exactly what. So here's the thing. We can go back to the story of John Adams defending the Revolutionary War, you know, the British soldiers who killed American protesters, but he defended them and then became the second president of the United States. This country is founded on the principle that you just imbibed right now. I fully agree. And at the end of the day, she had her trial. She had her day in court. It did not end up the way the protesters in her favor thought it would end up. They thought it was a clear slam dunk. Either there was a conspiracy or there's so much reasonable doubt, and the investigation was tunnel vision. All investigations are tunnel vision. Yeah, they're not supposed to be, but they're all tunnel vision. The question is, were they wrong? Were they improper? And so for me, you know, justice has been done. She had her day in court. The prosecution put on a case for 8 weeks. She put on a defense for 2 days. And in that 2 days, there was not a single witness that said any member of the House left suspiciously for 30 minutes and came back in. No one came and testified that John O'Keefe came into the House. That case would have been over at that point. Conspiracy for sure. No one did it. No one from the family of John O'Keefe tested in her favor. She had her day in court. And so right now, for there to be a mistrial, I think that would be a tragic ending to this saga. I think this saga needs to end in a decision. At the end of the day, you don't want to tell a jury, I don't care what you think, you got to convict or acquit. That's a tension point. Constitutionally speaking, that's a tension point. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in these next few days. If the jury comes back and says, we cannot reach a decision, this judge is going to have no choice but to just let them go.
It may be a process where they come back and say, we are deadlocked, actually using the words, or we have tried our best and we cannot come to a decision. And then she'll likely give them another more firm charge where she says, go back in, try harder to actually come to a decision. We call that the Allen charge or the dynamite charge, because you don't want to, as you said, Michael, force a jury to make a decision when there isn't a clear answer and that they are unable to do it, but you do want them to try very hard after all of this time and effort that's gone into it. We are going to get to a break, but we